the Valley Current.
Hello, Jack.
Hey, Jack, you look great.
Oh, thank you very much.
You got Ireland behind you. I guess that's where your heart is, right?
Well, for my golfer day, I guess we're like a half Irish or roughly. And I had one great golf trip my whole life. There were 8 of us, and 7 of them were not tech guys. They built the valley with their hands, like the cement and gravel guy.
Right.
Another one.
Right.
They all made a fortune, by the way. Yeah. So we had 9 days in Ireland and 9 days in Scotland. Had a driver, so drinking and driving was not a problem. But it was just, and they were all pretty hardened guys, but they all just folded up like little kids when it came to golf in Ireland and Scotland.
That almost looks like Stinson Beach's hill that you climb to get out of Stinson Beach. If I show you a picture of the hill you go up when you exit from the beach, you go up this hill. It almost looks identical. I'll find it and I'll send it to you. That's Ireland, though. You're along the coast of Ireland, right?
Yeah. The Ring of Kerry.
Right.
So one of my great roommates and still really good friend for years from Santa Clara, Bob Pauli, Pauli.
Mm-hmm.
Very Italian chap, It would tease us over the years about, you're a phony Italian, you're more Irish than you are this. It's just kind of a running joke. And Bob's still a current mechanical engineering. A lot of this stuff they don't teach anymore, so it's just amazing. He finally did the Ancestry.com or one of them. He's more Irish than he is. He didn't know he was any Irish. He's more Irish than he is Italian.
So he was criticizing you for being mostly Irish, even though you have an Italian last name.
Oh yeah, teasing the hell. What you name like Balletto? You're not even Italian.
Jack, I want to thank you for turning me on to that Stanford material that you did a presentation or really did an interview.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah.
Let me just tell you something. It's 108 interviews that started in 1990. This guy, Rob Walker, started doing this with audio cassettes in 1990, little analog cassettes. And he must have given a gift to Stanford, because Stanford doesn't do anything unless you motivate them to do it. Not very beautiful university, great group of people, but I can tell you it's very financially savvy. So I'm sure Rob gave a gift, and I guess he passed away. And passed the baton to a new gent named Rob Blair. I don't know what Blair's.
Oh, yeah. Well, I know both of them. They both used to work at Fairchild back in the 60s when I was there.
So there's 108. There's only 107 that work. I actually had someone go through and see if they all work. One of them, apparently, the recording went bad or something, and Stanford doesn't care, right? So there's 107, and they all have transcripts. So we found the transcript for yours, and I sent it to you. We also did a summary of that transcript. And they mostly have videos, but some of them were done so long ago that they only have audios. They don't have the video. Right. Yours they have the video of too. And it's the classic kind of simple video. There's no it's called camera B where you put other images in. Yeah, so it's very simple stuff. Yeah. But I have to tell you, there's a ton of wisdom in that material. I only randomly sampled a few of the 107 that the person that I work with that is helping me, Stephanie Drury, said, hey, there's some really good stuff here, but, it's not all perfectly recorded. Yours, I think, is pretty good. I listened to yours. I actually listened to yours twice, so I know a lot of the background. But why don't you, just for the sake of our discussion, give a little bit of background, because you come from a family of both Irish as well as Italian. You're kind of a mixed.
And German for sure, and Spanish. Right. I said Scottish in the interview, but it's Spanish. My wife is Scottish.
Right.
There's 7, and 3 I forgot. Scottish might be one of them, but for sure Spanish. Yep. And by the way, the reason Stanford did all that is Bob Noyce, the real creators of the chip industry. Bob Noyce and Gordon Moore. They were the 2 key guys. There were 8 really important people, but they give full credit to every one of the 8. One of which was Kleiner Perkins. So here they are. They invented the whole thing at Fairchild. Then they go off and start Intel, which of course took it to a whole other level. At Fairchild, they perfected how do you make a transistor at all? I mean, it just looked like a minestrone soup, at one point. They go, well, it looks like a mosquito.
So you wouldn't even go back, as some of these people would, to RCA and Sarnoff and talk about, the electronics industry really arose from World War II and the invention of radio, really the invention of radio and TV.
The invention of radar.
And radar, right?
Yeah, well, radar was so, especially in the early stages, I'm sure you read about Pearl Harbor. It was so, they couldn't tell the difference between the Japanese force at Pearl or a bunch of pigeons. So at first they thought, well, it's just a flock of birds. Right. So they watched the Japanese Zeros come on in and blow everything up for a while until it was too late.
I mean, in a way, that was kind of a Sputnik moment. I mean, you talk about a Sputnik moment in your presentation or your interview, but in a way, I think that event was in many ways the biggest event up through, say, the Civil War. I mean, if you go through like American Revolutionary War, Civil War, War of 1912, Spanish-American War, like you go through, the attack on Pearl Harbor was an event that really changed the course of American history and changed the course of global history because of the creation of the nuclear bomb, the hydrogen bomb. And basically, that was the beginning of the Manhattan Project right then and there, right? Pretty much.
Yeah, and, until Pearl Harbor, we thought we were pretty impervious. Here we are. Here's the USA. Here's Europe's way over there, Japan's. So we're safe. What do we have to worry about? Yeah, so it changed the course of everything, as you said.
And it changed in a way, I think it changed the American culture. My dad actually volunteered at the age of 17, and they took him in the Navy. Yeah. My dad was born in 1925 and joined the Navy after Pearl Harbor in 1942 at the age of 17. His parents thought he was nuts, but he said, hey, I've got to go and help the country win this war.
Fantastic.
I mean, he volunteered really at an age that was inappropriate to accept volunteers, but they were taking everyone. And he never regretted it. I mean, he was kind of a patriot. And I think back to things he said about what he learned in the Navy about how things were radically changing towards more and more use of electronics that were being tested in the military. And Silicon Valley grew off of military contracts. I mean, that's what a lot of people don't realize. A lot of Silicon Valley would not have existed but for military contracts.
Yeah, this is a good book that just came out. I've got 1 million books about Midway. Can you see it? Probably.
Right, I see it. Yeah, Midway. Yeah, I see it.
It's the latest one. I just started reading. It's really good. They're all good, but this guy has a chance to step back and look at it even more. So when my wife and I met at Lockheed, we had to get in the plane. We got married in 65. So this would have been in 1964. We went down to Edwards Air Force Base, where her dad lived, to meet him. And nice to meet you. I'd like to marry your daughter. He was on the Big E as a fighter pilot, the Navy fighter pilot. But he was her stepdad because her birth dad was also on the Big E, and they were buddies. Well, he got killed, her birth dad. Mm. The other guy came back, married the mom. They all knew each other before they went off on the Big E into the war. Right. So pretty cool story. Then we said, well, tomorrow let's have, if you're not doing anything, I'm down here to meet you. We'll go to Edwards and have lunch with Chuck Yeager.
Great.
Have lunch with Chuck Yeager? He says, oh, yeah, we're drinking buddies. Those guys drank their ass off. Jack, they took turns bailing each other out of jail, is the way he told me.
Probably. But let me tell you an interesting story about Lockheed, because I think that was and still is kind of a powerful company. Sure. When I first started practicing, when I first left Davis, Stafford, Kelman, and Fenwick, we had started Apple Computer, Oracle, Electronic Arts, great stories about, passing on stock that would have made us all a small fortune.
Oh, yeah.
When I started my own practice, when I started what now is Computer Law Group, which literally is more than 40 years ago now.
Yeah.
I get a call from Lockheed's general counsel, I'm literally in my garage office. I had an office in College Terrace, Palo Alto. I had the garage walled off, where half of the garage was for a car and the other half of the garage was my office, right? Because I had little kids. I had little kids
right now.
Yeah, I had little kids.
Yeah.
And I just didn't need to be disturbed. I had a phone line. By the way, we didn't really have cell phones. We had like a landline and a fax machine. Yeah. I get a call. I get an unsolicited call from the general counsel of Lockheed. He said, I tried to reach you at what was then Fenwick. I think it was Fenwick, Stone, Davis, and West then. Now it's Fenwick and West. Yeah. And they said you left and you started your own firm. And I traced your number to this number, which was my business number, which I still have, 650-327-9800. But back then, it was 415-327-9800. Then Silicon Valley changed to 650, and we lost the 415 number.
Oh, right? Yeah.
So 650-327-9800, he calls it. I pick up the phone, and I say Jack Russo. I say law offices of Jack Russo, because that's how it started. And then I can tell you a minute. And he says, we've got a case, and we think you're the right lawyer for the case. Do you have a team? Of course, I say, yes, I have a team. I can put a team together. He said, we have this software package that does CAD called CADM, CADAM. CADM was the CAD software that did all the wiring diagrams on the Lockheed aircraft. Wow. And he said, we have a company that's totally ripped us off, ripped off our software. They're a company that's being funded by a bunch of VCs in Route 128 in Boston, and they're totally ripping us off. We think you're the right guy for the case. Can you come down to Burbank tomorrow? Just catch a flight. Don't worry. We'll reimburse you. We'll pay you for your time. We think you're the right guy. I jump on a plane the next day to Burbank. My wife is like, what are you doing? I said, I just got a call from the general counsel of Lockheed. General counsel of Lockheed, it's a big guy. He's in Burbank. He wants to have a sit-down meeting. I go to Lockheed. They signed me up. I put together a team. The law firm got instant credibility from. We had this big federal. We actually had several federal cases against this company. It was such a great story because I remember getting a call from one of the people at Fenwick and West and say, Did you have that client lead while you were a partner here at Fenwick?
Oh, no.
It was so funny. I said to them, I didn't even want to do this work. I'd rather do works for startups than big companies. But, you guys didn't want to take the startups I would bring in. I'd bring in all these startups that had no money. They said, did you have that before you left us? I didn't. It was 6 months after I left. They picked up the phone comes directly to me. It was
what was the name of the company, by the way, back in Boston? I'm sure you recall.
There were two of them. One was called Adage, ADAGE, and the other one was called ADRA, ADRA. And the case that we filed against both was CADM was actually a separate subsidiary of Lockheed that did this software for Lockheed. Yeah. And I won that case, and I recovered a bunch of money. And the Lockheed General Counsel said to me, "This is the first case in my history of being general counsel that I've ever seen a check come into Lockheed. It's always money going out. You made us money on this case after your
surprised me, Jack. I've seen you in action, so
it was so funny. I had to tell that story because as you were talking about how Lockheed played a role in your career and how important it was. I mean, Lockheed was a major, and still is, I think, sort of a major company, right?
They should have hired you. I told this story about Daycom.
Right.
Out in Lockheed Missile Display. So it was a big rectangular building we all called the Blue Cube.
Right.
So all the antennas were stuck in there, and they're really smart guys doing all the satellite work.
Right.
Do all that, they had to invent or perfect data compression. So they were the experts at it. And I'm sure they brought MIT in, but that's where it was. So I don't know about that. But there's a point where I end up at Rico at that company called Daycom, data compression is what it was for.
Right.
And they're inventing this small fax machine about that big, facsimile. Whereas Xerox still only had the equivalent of the IBM computer, fills up a whole room. Oh, wow, this is really impressive. These guys, it was all ripped off from Lockheed.
Right.
The Blue Cube.
Right.
When the Japanese bring me in, because I was just consulting
Right.
The American guy it was called Savin, S-A-V-I, Savin Business Machines.
Right.
What he wanted to do was sell. He was the office equipment guy. So he's bankrolling this thing, blatant ripoff. He sees me. What is that? I'm the only white guy. He would get that guy out because he knew I would probably blow the whistle, or he didn't want anybody around here knowing. But that's where it came from, clearly. So that kicked off Rico, who to Japan. After that, Rico kicked Xerox all over the place and still are. But something as simple, well, it's not simple, it's hard. But a little invention like data compression better than the next guy because it wasn't new that's something we all ought to do. That did it. The whole industry go off of that, you know.
Well, what we have in Silicon Valley that's a little different than the East Coast is Silicon Valley and all of California have a very tough rule that says you cannot have a non-competition agreement with an employee. And you really can't even have what some people like to call a garden leave period, where cooling off period, someone leaves, they can't immediately go to a competitor. They go like in 6 months. In the UK, they call it garden leave. In New York, on Wall Street, they call it garden leave. But, you know, the East Coast and particularly Boston, they have the potential to have non-compete. So there's kind of a regional advantage to Silicon Valley because you get people that basically often just don't get along with a founder or a C-suite member, and they think they can do it better. And often they can do it better. And so they leave. So you could say the Fairchild guys, they all leave and they say, we're going to do something better at Intel. We're going to get some funding. And the funding sources are told by the lawyers, as they would be. If they do it without stealing trade secrets, they're going to be okay. They've got to do it in a smart way, but they can take all their talent with them. They can take all their experience with them. And once you know that something can happen, like Musk has a head start for sure with SpaceX and Tesla to some degree. But now that people know that you can shoot these rockets and have them come back to Earth, you know, there's going to be another company. Maybe it'll be a Bezos company. Maybe it'll be an Oracle Ellison company. Who knows? That'll do something competitively, because fundamentally, once you know that something can happen, it gives you a lot of ability to say, you know what, this is not exactly rocket science. This is now just being a fast follower. So, of course, Tesla has had lots of followers now. Lots of people have electric vehicles. And, you know, for my money, I just rented, by the way, footnote, I just rented a Kia EV6. I have to tell you, I have had a Tesla S from almost the beginning. I've got the one with the free electricity. I have to tell you, I thought the Kia EV6 was just as good as the Model S, and it's like half the price. I mean, it's just amazing what the Koreans have done. I don't think they've stolen any trade secrets. They just buy a car and take it apart and figure out what makes it work. It's a
Chinese
different car, but it's
so we're in trouble.
I mean, so what I've noticed about you is you really haven't had, like, I talk to a lot of people, they've had like 20 different companies they work for. You have kind of a handful of companies you work for because you get out of Santa Clara University, right? Tell us that story. Tell us how your career progressed, because I think it's like six or seven companies before you decide to start your own VC firm, right? 6, 7, 8 companies?
Something like that. Well, of course, went to Lockheed first, fresh out of school. And I think, and I tell that story, how a month into it, the Cuban Missile Crisis hits. It's like, holy Christ.
Big event. Almost as big as the attack on Pearl Harbor in many ways.
Oh, yeah. Right? If we'd have been asleep at the wheel for another week or 2 weeks,
right,
it would have been, hey, too late, man.
And let me drop a footnote here. Let me drop a footnote here, because I read something recently that I literally almost fell off my chair. And when you hear this, you're going to fall off your chair. And I'll send you the chapter in this book. There's a book that's been done that mentions that most people don't know this, but there were 2 nuclear warheads, 2 by the Russians and 2 by the Americans, launched into outer space as kind of a show of force right before that crisis was settled. Khrushchev fired off a nuclear warhead missile into outer space. The U.S. matched it. Yeah, no one knows this, but it's in this book, and they say it's documented, and I believe it. This author is very credible. I'll get the name of the book. It's in the back of my mind. I read it recently. I just about fell off my chair, and they said it was the second round where there was some sort of bigger Russian missile and some sort of bigger American missile, and that's when there was a moment of we're going to end the friggin' world. We're going to end the friggin' world. The third one is not going to be the charm. The third one's going to be the real thing. And either the U.S. is going to fire it first preemptively, which historically we've not done. You know, I'm not a big believer in conspiracy theories, but now that I announced that there were these nuclear warheads, I wonder whether someone's listening in and just shut my computer down. Literally, my computer just stopped running. Like, it was so weird. Like, you wonder whether or not Snowden has a point here, that they're always listening in and they're saying, why are you repeating the stuff that's in that book? Now, I didn't publish the book, and the book's been published for over a year. And man, I can't remember the title to it, but I'll get it in a minute. But I tell you, I just about fell off my chair when I heard that statement.
Yeah.
So, two each.
I'm very skeptical, Jack, about that because that was 1962. We could barely get the Polaris missile launched out of the submarine.
So you don't think anything got fired, or if something got fired, it was nothing that was ever
1962. I mean, I can't. Let's look at the book. What the heck?
I mean, we're talking about having nuclear weapons in World War II, which is 15 years earlier, and Hiroshima, of course, suffered the consequences, as well as the second city.
I'll tell you another one that I can't remember where I read this. The Bay of Pigs a year later.
No, what about it?
Well, so the Cubans go into the Bay of Pigs, thinking, or having been told that our Air Force will bomb the hell out of that bay. So before they get there, we're going to bomb the shit out of it. You'll have an easy.
You'll have coverage. You'll have coverage.
The planes show up an hour later, Jack.
Right.
They had the wrong time zone. The military had the wrong time zone.
Oh,
how's that?
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah.
That's a classic, isn't it?
Yeah, they always say about war, just a collection of accidents and mistakes.
So in general, conceptually, if it's true that there really was kind of this show of force, significant show of force, I guess what we would say is they know how to come right to the edge of having a nuclear war and then pull back.
Right? It's a big bluff, though. All these wars are big bluff. Who's got the best bluffer?
So the name of the book is Nuclear War. It's by Annie Jacobson. I want to say it was published last April, like 6 months ago. And I listened to it, because I do this exercise program where I spend 3 hours every morning exercising. Yeah, I spend an hour riding a bike to yoga, an hour in yoga, and then an hour riding a bike back. And I wear these earphones that are over your, not over your ear, but on the side of your head. And you can still ride a bike and do yoga. And I listen to a lot of books on tape. So I listened to Jacobson's book, Nuclear War. You gotta get that, Jack. You gotta read it. It's like
I'm writing it down.
Chapter.
Yeah.
And she really does an amazingly thorough analysis. I'll send the link to you too.
I'd like to read it. Yeah.
And you'll be like, if that happened, then we have some precedent for what I would call like doing crazy shit, because I don't know what happens in outer space. I know there's a lot of outer space out there, but now we've got a lot of stuff floating around in outer space, right? I mean, I don't know how crowded it's getting.
Oh, yeah.
But all this military stuff has really created a valley that is operating. I mean, my way of thinking, it's operating at like 500 miles an hour on a racetrack that's not really designed to go more than maybe 250. Look at these companies and how fast they move. Yeah. And I'm just shocked comparatively.
Yeah.
You have eight or so positions in companies that were growth companies, and you started Synertech, which is a good story, right? About how that gets started.
Well, Synertech and VLSI, both. I was a founder of both. One thing about Synertech, so at that point, we're watching the Japanese, not the Chinese, Japanese back then,
Right.
Just take over the TV industry, the calculators, the cars. They're just creaming U.S. industry.
Right.
We know it. They were fat, dumb, and happy after the war. Pretty much no competition. Everything been bombed out, including Japan.
Right.
But of course, but they came back, and so the foreign bet, we had Bulova watch, who was getting creamed by the Japanese and the Swiss because they're already using integrated circuits,
right,
and the gears and stuff you see inside of a Rolex, whatever. Victor Comptometer, leading company for calculators and office machinery. Well, those are the two most important ones. It was a mini computer company and a telecom company, but so Bulova watch. So they all invested because Fairchild wouldn't even talk to them; they were too small. So Bulova decides to design their own watch. So they come to us. They want us to do the chip for the watch. So, Jack, the thing is done with LEDs,
right,
which meant now you need a battery the size of a car battery to keep these things running. And they wanted one button. So you had to program your watch like Morse code, but doot, 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 with one button. Their entree, we're pretty tech guys back here in Boulevard, New York City, we don't, or wherever they were, Long Island. So we're stuck because they want us to, we're already selling chips to the Japanese that use LCDs but don't use any power.
Right.
And you don't have one button, the whole thing, everything about it's wrong. The architecture is wrong, but it was probably about 1.5 inches on each side, weighed about a pound. And you had to program it. You had to bring along your instruction set if you ever wanted one. Nobody ever bought that watch. They couldn't even give away at one of their sales meetings. We heard about that later. So they, as a result, never took advantage of their decision to invest in Silicon Valley. And Victor did the same thing. They just totally underestimated the Japanese. And so all those East Coast guys are too slow. They invented a lot. They invented the chip, right? That was out Bell Labs.
Right.
They invented the transistor technology. They invented computing. It's all back east from Michigan. But all those people they just work too slow. And fundamentally, that was the reason that Silicon Valley took over. We invented very few things here, basically very few basic things. But we're real quick to get them to market once somebody made an invention.
I think what those 100+ interviews demonstrate is the group of mostly men. I think there are a few women, but it's mostly men. They had a certain speed of trust where if someone came up with a great idea, it wasn't about the money. It was about the mission. It was much more about, we're going to do this now. And you just trusted that someone as a leader like you, as a founder and CEO, say, this is what we're going to do. This is how we can do it. And I've got the resources lined up to do it. And it wasn't like, okay, how much am I going to make when it's all done? And how many years do I have to put in? It was a mission. It was very Sputnik-like.
And most of those plans made no sense at all. Well, you're going to go against Intel. You're going to raise $500,000 and compete with Intel and AMD and National and TI. Well, it can't be done. Well, I don't know. We're going to try it.
Right.
And sure, we ended up the supplier for Atari and Apple. And then later at VLSI, 6 years later, we invented the foundry industry, the EDA industry, courtesy of Xerox PARC. But so in a way, I guess you might even say I was more of a aggregator of, if I didn't do it myself, at least I knew this is going to be important. Let's bring those people in, or let's buy that company, or and maybe pretty good vision on where things are going to go. So we can just ride one of those, I guess, and go the slow route or try to put it all together. So personally, Jack, I didn't do anything engineering-wise, except it's because I had a degree. I think I could comprehend what other people were talking about, maybe a little better than someone just had the MBA degree, something like that.
Right, but you had a respect of colleagues that you could bring in to a place that was just at founding mode, early stage mode. And I don't know, you tell me, was it mostly a financial discussion with these folks, or was it more mission related? Because what I remember in Silicon Valley back decades ago, it was mission related. I mean, I don't think the Jobs and Wozniak, when they started Apple, were really thinking, well, we're really doing it for the money. I mean, I think that they were thinking, we're going to do something really great here.
They were doing what I was just talking about, they were quick to observe that, hey, this thing called microprocessor that just became invented or conceived in 71, 72 was something that the young people comprehended. Now, the old guys, like Bull of a Watch, they didn't want to hear this story about is this new technology going to put you all out of work? By the way, nobody cares about gears and that kind of. So these young kids, like the was and Steve, luckily they worked at Atari, because Atari really was really the first one in Silicon Valley, the first one to recognize that all this technology developed with the aerospace world, with Varian and Hewlett-Packard. And Atari is the first one to say this could be taken over to the consumer world. Now that's what really changed this valley, because there was there was some decent success with the aerospace world, doing okay. Lockheed had 25,000 employees, and Hewlett-Packard was making test equipment, which Lockheed would buy. So everything was going good, better than most. But the thing that really kicked it into high gear with really high volume was Atari. And then when Steve left, Apple. But Atari is the seminal company that kicked in the whole concept that we can do retail and really high volume stuff out here. Until then, all the customers were someplace else. We had to fly to Europe or fly to Japan. Went to Japan many, many times.
And you could say that Atari was run by a very shrewd operator, right? Jack Tramiel, if I'm remembering the names correctly.
Oh, Atari? No, totally wrong.
Okay,
Nolan Bushnell.
Okay.
And Al Alcorn, who I brought to your party Sunday, were the founders of Atari.
Okay.
And they invented the video game. The Pong was the first product.
Right.
That's the one where everybody goes, what? They're going to buy a million? HP buys 5,000 of something if it's a big hit.
Right.
And these want $1 million? Yeah, because every little kid wants to buy a Pong. That's why. So they really talk about inflection points. And then, of course, when Steve left, he worked for Alcorn. Alcorn was Steve's only boss.
Oh, okay.
To get you over there to talk to, because he got more stories that are
conceptually. Steve Jobs learned a lot about consumer products by working at Atari, right?
Oh, totally, sure, absolutely, no doubt. He knew nothing until he started working there. But at that time, there were a bunch of young kids, not just them. There were probably 50 of them doing what they call it, the homebrew, homebrew
computing with the little plastic baggie with parts in it. You went to those meetings and there'd be someone selling a plastic baggie with a bunch of parts in it, and you had to solder the stuff yourself.
So while Bull of a Watch was sitting there, they got Omar Bradley, when World War II was on the board. And you got to tell us how to make watches? Who are you punks from California?
Right.
But they sent a guy out to shape us up one time because we were a very reluctant supplier. We're the biggest. The guy comes out, Jack, a little side story. Never been to California. Takes his wife, unbeknownst to us, gets here early, goes to San Francisco, Chinatown, the Marriott, I think it was, in China, or Holiday Inn, maybe. They go out, and he's telling us this on Monday, but they arrives Saturday. They go out to dinner, they get robbed. The whole Chinese restaurant is held up. All your wallets. So. And we didn't even know this until Monday. He shows up to kick our ass. He's, I got to tell what a horrible weekend this is. And then he's trying to leverage us to cut the price. And we don't want to make this thing at all. So we're not going to cut the price. We're going to raise the price.
Right.
And he said, listen, you got to do me a favor. I'm going to retire in 1 year. This trip is he's a VP of purchasing from Boulevard. It's bad enough I lost all my money and my wife hates me. And so he gave me like a 2% discount on the trip. So he can go back. I slapped him around, boss.
Right.
And nobody.
You saved him from probably getting a divorce because his wife was like, "Why'd you take me on this trip?"
They would have.
And that was back in the day when there wasn't much crime in San Francisco. That was back in the day when there wasn't much crime.
Not much. Chinatown was known to. You got to be careful. That was known, but nothing like today.
Oh, today, whenever I drive my car to San Francisco, my wife is like, "You're crazy. The car's going to get broken into." And she's right. You can't park on the street anymore. But I got to tell the story about Steve Jobs, because I think I've said it to you before, but I think it's worth weaving in here. When David Stafford, Kelman, and Fenwick, a bunch of New Yorkers, came out to California, really because Blake Stafford had gone to Stanford, and Blake just recently passed away. I did a eulogy for him. Blake was a great lawyer, and he was a brilliant guy, Princeton guy that came out to Stanford Law School, very smart guy, international tax guy, and a real estate kind of oil and gas guy as well. He had an interesting collection of expertise, and he had some really interesting clients. And so Jobs and Wozniak want to find a firm that can essentially start their business, incorporate them. Yeah. There was no legal Zoom back in those days. You went to a lawyer to incorporate. And they basically didn't want to go to Wilson Sonsini upstairs because Wilson was viewed as kind of a little bit stodgy and was not viewed as hip. And these were a bunch of New Yorkers, so maybe they'd be hip. So they come into the office. Jobs and Wozniak come into the office. I'm not there. I'm a young lawyer. The meeting is with the partner. The partner is Tim Todd. Tim Todd was a Bostonian that had come not from New York, but from Boston. He wore the suspenders and the bow tie. Oh, chubby guy. Yeah. Starched shirt, bow tie, suspenders, and always with the suit jacket on. But you opened it up, you could see the suspenders, and always well dressed, always extremely well coiffed. The shirt was always perfectly starched. The bow tie was always perfectly set up. Oh, and you see these two guys come in, and of course they smell like dope. Yeah, they smell like they've been smoking marijuana. And he has a meeting with them, the initial meeting with them. I just wish this initial meeting were recorded because it would be so funny. First thing you do when you start a company is you got to ask, well, you reserve the name because getting a name can sometimes be a problem. Yeah. And of course they hadn't done anything. They operated that business, quote unquote business, the homebrew, quote unquote business as a general partnership. General partnership, there were three guys, there was a third guy that they kind of forced out. This third guy was kind of supposedly the business guy, but he couldn't get them incorporated for some reason. I don't know what. He tells a story. He's got a book or a podcast or something, but they come in. And he asks, what's the name? And Jobs says, well, we really don't want a name. We want to use the symbol of an apple. Can you register just the symbol of an apple? Of course, he's confusing trademarks and logos with a corporate name, right? He's confused, right? So this guy, Tim Todd's like, no, you need a name. It's got to be something you can type on a computer. It's got to be actually registered, right? Put it on a sheet of paper. And Jobs says, well, okay, let's just go with the name Apple. And this guy was upset that Jobs wanted to call his computer company Apple. Yeah. And he convinced him to call it. He was trying to convince him to call it a different name. So when the meeting got over, let's say it was an hour, 90-minute meeting, whatever. It couldn't have been more than 2 hours. They asked Tim Todd, so did you accept this client? And he says, well, I have some question marks about whether we should accept them as a client. Why? Well, no. So number one, they showed up without getting dressed up for the meeting. They were wearing jeans and unwashed T-shirts.
Like my Boulevard Watch guy, just
exactly. So I said, okay. They said, okay, Tim, that's fine. We're in California now. We're not in New York. We're not in Boston. What was strike two? So strike two is they didn't even take a shower. They smelled like they'd been up all night. And I think I detected that they're smokers and they're smoking something I couldn't tell. Like he was upset. And okay, that's strike two. What was strike three? He said they have such a stupid name for the company. There's no way they're going to succeed.
Yeah.
Do you know the firm could have probably had 5% of Apple at inception? Sure. And had we held it, which of course we probably wouldn't have, but had we held it to today, the business is, I guess, soon going to be a $2 trillion business, I guess. Oh, yeah, would have been. Apple today.
Would have done pretty. Yeah.
I mean, it's on a path to being a $2 trillion company. It wouldn't have been 5% after all the dilution, but let's say it was 1%.
When Steve quit,
$2 trillion.
When Steve quit Atari, and he told them what he was going to do. And they originally quit. He wanted to do it within Atari, but they said, no, we're not going to give. We barely have any money, Atari. we're not going to fund you to. So they knew what he was doing, and he used the same bill of materials that Atari had for the cartridge.
6502, right? 6502, right?
And the custom circuits and all the other stuff. So we not only had the micro, we had custom circuits and RAMs and ROMs and everything. So he used the same bill of materials for the Apple II.
Right.
So he's leaving with their blessing. They said, we're not going to sue you. And so Steve offered Nolan Bushnell for $50,000, a third of the company for $50,000. That would be his seed cap,
Right.
But once they got out, well, then they got a hold of Markland and Don Valentine.
And a lot of people don't realize that Markla didn't actually put up any cash. He put up a line of credit guarantee.
Yeah.
Markla signed a guarantee for $100,000 Bank of America line of credit, and he got that significant stock. I mean, he's like the quietest guy in the background here. I mean, I don't think he does many interviews. I mean, I haven't seen
I don't think so.
Right?
No, but I think I told you when I went to Fairchild, Mike and I had adjoining offices.
Right.
So I didn't get to know him really well because 6 months later, and he was doing linear. He wasn't doing digital product. He was doing analog products.
Right.
But he knew Noyce and all those guys who started Intel. They were already gone by the time I got there.
Right.
So when they got to the point where they wanted a product marketing guy, which is what I did. So they hired, where'd Mike go? He's off. He joined Intel. So, what's Intel? So, but a little bitty guy.
Right.
But smart, smart as a whip.
Savvy guy, super savvy guy. If you think about it.
He started off in aerospace too, down in L.A.
Mm-hmm.
Craft thing, something like that. So a lot of people started in the aerospace industry. That's all there was back then. In the 60s, like me and Lockheed, almost all of it, especially all the L.A. guys. There was a point where it looked like Intel wasn't going to make it.
Right.
They were heading down.
Right.
People are leaving. Mike would always buy some guy's stock. You're going to leave, but you're vested, 20%. I don't know the details, but I know he did, in fact, buy out some of the guys that got panicked and left.
Right. And wisely, like I view companies a little bit like marriages or like relationships. They have their peaks, they have their troughs, and the people that really hang in there. Yeah. If they really can persistently hang in there, Ray Kroc, the founder of McDonald's, the food hamburger company, has this saying about persistence. Persistence is what makes the difference. Yeah. And if you really can hang in there, you can make the marriage work. You can survive. You can avoid the divorce. You can do a lot of things. And for businesses, I think it's the same thing. If the essential team can hang in there, I mean, because if you look at most corporations, there aren't many. There are some family corporations that are maybe getting to be like 400 years old, maybe even going on 500 years. But they're like Japanese beer companies, and they're businesses that really are families, and the family keeps the business going. Businesses that are run by corporate people, I mean, they merge, they combine, they sell, and there are very few that get to 100 years old. Like I think IBM is going to go on 100 years old soon, and people are looking at like Ford Motor Company. Like, okay, Ford Motor Company maybe is going to be 100 years old, but there are not that many businesses that are not family businesses that make it to 100 years old. There's very few. And you look at what happens, people sell out, the next generation doesn't want it, whatever it is. I mean, Apple Computer, it had the same lows. Like if you look at the stock chart on Intel had the trough that you mentioned. You look at the stock chart on Apple, Microsoft saved Apple. Microsoft made a big commitment to Apple to keep Apple alive, to avoid having IBM control the PC. And to be able to have multiple players for Microsoft software.
Right.
I mean, it was a smart move. I mean, I wonder if Steve Jobs were alive today. He died, 15, 16, 17 years ago? If he were alive today, would he be shocked at what's played out? I think he'd be shocked that there still is not an Apple notebook computer that has a screen that you can touch. I think he'd be shocked at that. A decade has gone by. Microsoft's got a notebook computer that you could touch the screen and move the screen around. And Apple still hasn't done that because I guess they're worried the iPad sales would go down. Shocks me. That shocks me. I think it would shock him. I think it would shock him. And the reason I say that is I remember 30 plus years ago, I represented a guy. The guy's name is Steve Kitchen. By the way, he changed his name when he changed his gender. He changed his gender from male to female before it was fashionable to do it. And her name now is Jessica Stevens. And I represented Steve Kitchen and his company called Woodside Design Group, WDA, in Redwood City. And he did a bunch of video games. The Kitchen brothers were famous. They helped start Activision. The Kitchen brothers helped start Activision. And I tell this story because Steve came to me one day and he says, I got this call from this guy. Do you know him? His name is Steve Jobs. And I told him the whole story about Apple. I mean, obviously everyone knew Steve Jobs. And he said, Steve wants me to help him figure out how to get in volume flat panel displays because Steve had a relationship with a bunch of Japanese companies that were doing flat panel displays. And they always wanted to know what's going on in Silicon Valley. And Steve had a relationship. And so he said, Steve Kitchen said to Steve Jobs, I can help you. And according to Steve Kitchen, Jobs said, I have a vision for a notebook computer that will open like this, like a book. And will open and be touch screen on both sides, and you'll be able to read on one side while you take notes on another side. And I think Steve Jobs would be shocked that we've gone a decade and they haven't created that vision from really 30 years ago. 30 years ago, he had that vision. So if he returned today, he would be, the CEO might be, oh, bullshit, we've done great work, we're a multi-trillion-dollar company. I think if Steve Jobs, no one asked this question, if Steve Jobs returned today, would he be disappointed? I think he would be disappointed. I think he would say, it's great that you got a great iPhone company, but man, where the hell is the touchscreen notebook computer with the two screens that open like this? That was my vision from 30 years ago, more than 30 years ago. I think he'd be disappointed.
It's amazing. Absolutely. At least they kept going because you just have the same discussion about Bob Noyce coming back and going into Intel and seeing what the people did after him, what they did to Intel. And
a lot of disappointment, right? A lot of disappointment.
Full of a what scenario? We're Intel. We don't have to, what is this portable thing? Yeah, just a bunch of idiots running companies. That's the trick. I think what happens, Jack, let me say three things and then we close. I think, and you tell me if I've got this right. Number one, the engineers are mission driven, and when they accomplish the mission, a lot of money follows. Number two, when the money follows, all of a sudden people think you have to get a bunch of MBAs and CPAs in here to manage the money because the money is gushing in. And adult supervision, Jack.
Yes, we need adult. We need some people that know how to jockey spreadsheets, and we're doing other shit. So we got to get people, and the MBAs and CPAs and lawyers, number three, they friggin' take over. They take over and they say to the engineers, you can't do that. You want to do a clam shell machine, that's going to cost $10,000. No one's going to buy that. Who cares? You can't do that.
You know what's going to happen to our stock second quarter if we do that? We're going to. Why do we need all these PhDs anyway? What they're doing will impact the spreadsheet for 2 years.
They look at it like, are you crazy? You know how to make butter with the milk you have, and the butter is selling. You want to go into cheesecake? That's nuts. Don't do that. Don't do that.
Yeah, but Bud Light found that out.
No, it's serious. I mean, I'm convinced that what happens is there's like this changing of the guard.
No doubt.
Tim Cook is a nice guy, but he's a bean counter. I mean, I may get sued by him for defamation, but I remember Tim Cook when he was at Compaq Computer, counting up the dollars that it was going to cost to get the price of that luggable machine down by $10. I mean, nice guy, but not someone that's really thinking about, hey, Steve Jobs' vision. I mean, I would be spending, if I were the CEO, I'd be spending so much time talking to people of what was Steve Jobs' vision and what ways did he express it? And maybe we can learn something from that vision about where this company needs to go next.
Yeah.
Because it ain't going to just be the next iteration of an iPhone is going to be, okay, now we'll make it open both sides, but you can't make it too big, Well,
the ultimate on that example of the wrong way to do it is Boeing. That was run by engineers for years, and then once they decided, hey, we can save a lot of money by moving to Chicago.
It's crazy.
And now you don't have engineers running an aircraft company anymore.
I tell you, Jack, there's really an overarching theme there that can play into your book, which is at some point, what is the ultimate fall of Rome, the fall of the Roman Empire, is the people that are kind of courageous all get pushed aside by people who just say, you know what, I want to live for the moment, and I'm not going to go conquer some other country, man. I'm just going to figure out a way to have fun now and spend the money internally. I mean, it's an interesting question because I think as a country, we actually have the same problem as a country at a countrywide basis.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
I'll tell you a story my grandmother used to say.
Yeah.
A good year, a great year is a year when there's no police, that is no police events, no doctor, that is you don't have to go to a hospital, you don't see a doctor, and no lawyers, no lawyers at all. So you have to deal with lawyers. And she used to joke saying, that's a good year. And so she says, try to stay out of those three places because you know what? The second biggest cause of death is going to a hospital. Going to a hospital. When you go to a hospital, you take a high risk of death because you know what? There's a lot of mistakes that are made in hospitals.
A lot of sick people there too,
And there's a lot of sick people there as well. So good luck with that. Good luck with that.
One more short story after your event. So I brought Mike Warren, the radar guy.
Right.
Okay. So he had a chance to talk with Lou a little bit. So hopefully we're going to have some meetings. So Mike was so inspired by all your Italian stories because he used to cook. So he broke out his sauce recipes. He made pasta himself the day after your function.
Wow, nice.
So that night, the pasta was unbelievable. The big machine, and didn't make spaghetti, but he made the other one. So totally inspired by your.
Oh, that's good. I'm glad to hear that. Well, we'll go out to lunch with him. We'll go out to lunch in San Francisco by Uber. We'll take an Uber to San Francisco.
Oh, he would love that. He's only been here 3 years, right? He came out here because Apple hired his wife, who's a whiz in the carrier world, like Verizon and AT&T.
Okay. We'll have a meeting with Lou in San Francisco, and we'll have some
perfect. Oh, that's perfect.
I'll set that up. All right. Talk to you later. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Tune in next time on The Valley Current.